Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our usual Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum. Today, we are joined by the awesome, our regular, Miss Louise Dawson from JC, who's also representing BSME now, which is amazing news because we know we're in safe hands. Today's session is going to focus on restorative justice and student behaviour, and how we can shift the all too common pattern here in the UAE from looking at negatives and sanctions to praising positives and really looking at how we can support students in need. As usual, we request that all mics are muted. If you have any questions, pop it into the comments box. Myself and Susie will monitor the chat and we can answer questions toward the end of the session. Everyone is in the same boat here. While it does seem to be the same people presenting a lot of the time, we are by no means the only people out here. Please do participate. Do come and present with us. We always welcome people to come and join in presenting. I was just saying with Louise, we hope to host a session on graduating students and supporting students who may not be meeting graduation requirements regardless of curriculum. So if you have any expertise in that area, or you know of somebody who's doing something really good, please do let me know and I'll reach out to them. Okay, so Louise, I will stop sharing and hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Now, screen share. Can you all see my screen? Catherine, can you see the screen? Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's get you above there. Right, so welcome to the new year. I am probably going to come across as a little bit flat this afternoon. I am just about 3 weeks past quite a major operation. So I'm sitting in here. This is my first time online. I haven't been back to work yet. So you're all going to have to just put up with me squirming a little bit as it's a bit uncomfortable to sit here at the screen. Thanks, Catherine. Hadn't quite realised it was so soon. So we're going to talk about restorative versus punitive behaviour today. It's actually something that's quite dear to my heart. Anybody that knows me well will have heard me say behaviour is communication throughout nearly everything that I do. So I've been working with special needs from EYFS right through to university for about 22 years. I've spent 9 years in Dubai now, and previous to that I was 8 years in Hong Kong and within the UK. Like Catherine said a moment ago, we give advice freely. I don't have all the answers. The main reason I don't have all the answers is because every child and every family is unique, and we have a different take on every child as it comes through. I'm currently the head of inclusion at GEMS Jumeirah College, and as Catherine said, I'm now the network lead for BSME, so we look after about 144 schools. Network lead for inclusion. There are other network leaders as well. So today I want to talk about restorative practice, and I'm going to cover a little bit about what is the difference between punitive and restorative interventions, and then what are the restorative approaches that I'm trained in. I trained, oh goodness me, a long time ago, about 2008. I trained in restorative justice when I was working in the UK. I was working in a PRU, and every child there was excluded from mainstream, so our behaviours were quite extreme. And when we became a restorative school and moved away from detentions and keeping them after school and withdrawing their breaks and lunch times, and we moved to this restorative practice, it actually changed the whole ethos of the school. It changed relationships between children and parents, children and teachers, and really supported the children to take control of their own lives and destiny. This meme came back up on my LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and I thought it sums up a little bit about what we're talking about today. This is a child speaking. They never want to discuss what triggered you, just how you reacted. And I think you'll see that in schools quite often. So a child will get into a fight, and then we'll go into a meeting and we'll discuss, well, why did you get into the fight? Who are you fighting with, and how are we going to correct that, and how are you going to apologize, rather than why did you react in that way. So important to keep that as a focus. So what sort of behaviours will we see? So I believe that all behaviours are communication. If someone's in a corner crying, there's a reason for them crying. They're not just going to cry just for the sake of it. I also believe that children are inherently good and that they want to please the staff, they want to please other children, they want to please their parents. And so when that's not happening, I totally believe that we need to find out the reason for it, because every child that I have ever worked with, there has been an underlying reason. And as we know with children, those reasons are vast and varied. So the sorts of behaviours we might see can be really, really low level, from not listening, talking instead of listening to instruction, fidgeting, doesn't do things quietly, is a bit loud, finds everything boring, so they're emotionally turned off. They might be unprepared, they might lose things, forget things, not hand things back into the teacher. They draw on the materials, or they doodle in their books, all the way through to not handing in homework, truancy, smoking, breaking rules, fighting, not listening to the parents, communication breakdown, retreating to their room and not being social. And I added that last one in because I'm seeing quite a lot of that now in secondary students, where they are not coming out to talk to the parents. They're taking their meals in their rooms and they're kind of shunning away from that communication. And I think that what we're seeing is that parents are understandably not educationists. They don't understand the work. The children have got no one to bat ideas off when they're stuck at home, less so now that we're more back at school. But we certainly still have quite a few children at home who get sick or who are isolating or away from parents. And so that retreating to the room is definitely a behaviour that we've seen an increase of in the last few months. For secondary students, so in primary you see a lot of the low levels, but we must remember that for secondary students, they are growing beyond their parenting relationships. And those parenting relationships are very similar to the relationships teachers and children have in primary. They are conforming, they are told what to do, and they follow those rules. Whereas in secondary, they're beginning to develop their independence, they have their own philosophy on life. We know that they're going through puberty and having sexual and physical changes. They are finding and developing a place amongst grown-ups. So they're transitioning away from that parental being told what to do, knowing the rules and the guidelines and the boundaries, into actually now you're independent, study on your own, do your own revision timetables, manage your own learning, manage your own equipment. And that's a transition that we often don't, we expect the children to just do it and not train them through it. But then they also want to start doing things their own way. They don't necessarily want to conform. They want to make their own choices. They want to make their own choices about the subjects that they learn when they're going into secondary further education, and they're looking at choices and options. And what we don't do is we don't always allow them to make their own choices. We push them into what we feel they should be studying rather than what they want to. Children will kick back from that if they don't feel listened to. But what we also need to recognise is that children are children, they are growing, and they do need to make mistakes. I could tell a 3-year-old 20 times not to touch the oven because it's hot. Until they touch the oven, they don't recognise that it's hot. So they have to learn those and make their own mistakes. And all of that process of developing, moving from parenting relationships to adult relationships, all of these things leads to challenging behaviour. I totally believe that prevention is better than cure, and I think it's worth a nod to that in this presentation. Generally, if you have well-planned, carefully organised lessons, if the classroom has clear and high expectations, that learning outcomes are communicated with the children. So we're talking more about behaviour within classroom, clear expectations, explanations and examples, that we have effective questioning, that we have a variety of activities which match the ability and maturity of pupils, activities which are challenging, the pace that is correct for that group of children, so faster or slower, meaningful and connected and interesting resources. This is something that I've also added in recently, is that connecting things to real life nowadays is quite important. What we know is that when this cohort of children leave school, they're not necessarily going to be using the knowledge that we're imparting. They're going to be using the skills that we're imparting. So if the work that we're giving them is not meaningful, connected to real life, and doesn't have interesting resources, then we are probably going to start losing the children, because they can find the information themselves now very, very easily. Also, when we're looking at behaviours, we must never forget that we must look for special need. There may be an underlying learning barrier. Not all negative behaviours come from a learning barrier. Some negative behaviours will come from that growing natural process, but then you'll also find those that come from safeguarding issues such as abuse. Some children might be presenting with negative behaviours because they are screaming out for attention and help. So it's very, very important that we triangulate these reasons for behaviour. Obviously, my background is very much special needs, so my first reaction is always, should I be looking for attention deficit? Should I be looking for organisation and planning from dyslexia? And that's often my first thought. But I have found over my time that actually it's not a special need. It can be a safeguarding issue, which we mustn't overlook. This image came up recently on my social media as well, and I thought it useful to share. Not all challenge behaviour is going to result in identification of special need. However, and this was very interesting, what colour balls get an identification? So if you've got a spelling challenge, spelling can lead into a variety of other identifiable needs. But these children, where they present with one specific avenue of special need, they're going to get identified. The child that we often miss out are the children that are displaying identifications and triggers from a variety of different areas, and behaviour could fall into one of these. So whilst we need to always have our hat on, why is this child behaving in this way? What is it telling us? What are they communicating? Is it a safeguarding issue? Is it a special need? Is it a direct special need, or is it a variety of different things that are all presenting together? So discipline, so a lot of people say that when you're talking about restorative and it's the namby-pamby and it's the soft and it's cotton wooling, it's not. Discipline is discipline. We all need to have discipline in order to turn up to work on time, in order to, look presentable when I'm on a Zoom with you guys, to prepare this in advance, to know what I'm going to say. All of that takes discipline. It's not that discipline doesn't have to be negative. You don't have to impose discipline on people in a bad way in order for them to conform to society. We should all be teaching discipline throughout all of our lessons. Discipline is part of learning. And discipline means to teach or to train. It doesn't mean to hit or to shout at or to, be the negative. What we do know from loads of years of experience and research, harsh and humiliating discipline will make children fearful to learn and damage the relationship. And if you have no relationship, and if children are frightened, we know, good old Maslow, children are not going to make that progress. Restorative practice supports the development of emotional intelligence, and we know that from years and years of work and practice. Discipline is about helping a child to solve a problem. Punishment is making a child suffer for having a problem. To raise problem solvers, focus on solutions, not on retribution. And that's my whole philosophy. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with my own 3 children who are 7 years apart from when I first started to become a parent through to when I feel I was a fully developed parent. And it's interesting because my first child will tell you that I shouted a lot when he was younger, and that I was very negative. And then as I've gone through my teacher training and my special needs training and everything else I've gone through, if you spoke to my 3rd child, she would say I've never shouted at her. And I asked her earlier, and I asked my middle child. So my oldest child would say I shouted a lot. My middle child said you shouted when I did something wrong. My 3rd child would say I've never shouted at her. And that was very interesting to see how I've developed as a parent, which has been influenced a lot by my teaching and learning experiences and training. And so with my 3rd child, she's never been shouted at. We've never fallen out. We've never had an argument because I have practiced and developed this over the last 14 out of her 17 years. And that's very interesting to watch. So I know it works. She would never, she's nearly 18. She's never crossed me. She's never lied to me. She's never been where she shouldn't be. All of these things have fallen into place. So I know that that works from a parenting perspective and from a teaching perspective. Interesting to note that I have never given a detention in the 17 years I've been teaching. Never at all. I've never had to, because I've always done it through conversation. How do we currently deal with unwanted behaviours? So I see this time and time again in a whole variety of schools. The punitive sanction punishment model is that decisions are made by staff. Okay, you have forgotten your homework 5 times. You are going to give me an hour of your time and you're going to sit in silence. This is what we are going to do to you, and therefore this is what you are going to do. So I'm going to take away your time, and you are going to give me an hour of your lunch. And that is a really negative, punitive sanction behaviour model. With restorative, we have that conversation with the children. So you haven't done your homework 5 times. Why? That's the question we always don't often ask. Why have you not done your homework? Because you'll find that they haven't done it because they're sharing a room with 3 siblings, or they've currently moved house and they can't find their computer, or they don't understand the work, or there's a whole myriad of reasons why children don't do the homework. If they don't understand the work, then we need to be teaching the children to come and ask. Go and ask your support department, go and ask the maths department. Teaching the children to take responsibility is what it's about. If they don't understand, then there may be a learning barrier, so we might be looking at a special need. If they don't have a room to study in, we need to be able to facilitate a place for them to study. And quite often I'll get referred a child through the support department. Oh, this child's not doing their homework, they're not understanding. But as soon as I give them an hour once a week in school after lessons, they have that place to do the homework. Actually, it removes the barrier. So why? So we talk to the children. What does the child need to do to make up for what they have done wrong? Okay, so put yourself in the child place. What do I need to do for make up for what I've done wrong? And what do I need to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again? And that's the restorative model. It's so simple, it's quite scary. You can't teach children to behave better by making them feel worse. When children feel better, they behave better. You'll all agree with that, I hope, touch wood. Okay. So bringing in a lot of different training, it's also worth noticing the transactional analysis. If you haven't studied transactional analysis, there's a link in the references at the end, but do go out and look at transactional analysis. So when we are looking at behaviour, there's a book reference in the references list, which is all about transactional analysis in behaviour support. And when I'm looking at a child, I'm remembering the behaviour is not okay, but we have to remember that the child, we have to separate the two. The child can be a good child. We're all good. Every single one of us on this chat, we've got something like 85 people listening in now. Every single one of us is a good person, but every single one of us will have made a mistake and done something bad and done something that we regret. And if you haven't, let me know at the end, because you're doing something better than me. So separate the behaviours from the people, stop making people feel like they're doing something wrong, and help them to understand that the behaviour is what's not appropriate. But transactional analysis, when we are working with children, we have to assume that the children are okay. We also assume that they have the capacity to think, and we also assume that people can decide their own destiny and that the decisions they make can be changed. Obviously, the reverse of all of those is true. So you have to work out, when you're working with children and working with behaviour, are they okay? Are they able to think through this process? Because somebody with a cognitive challenge might not be able to, so then this might not work. Can they decide their own destiny? They might not be able to, so then restorative might not work. And are they able to change the decisions that they've made? Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. So transactional analysis plays into this a little bit. So restorative justice is the training that I had. It's a restorative practice and restorative approach. It resolves conflicts and then prevents harm in the future. Restorative means to enable those who have been harmed to convey the impact of that harm. So the Restorative Justice Council in the UK does work with teachers and with schools and has restorative schools, but they work with the whole range of support in the UK, all the way through to prison services and the police services. So you may have heard of instances where a burglar has burgled a house and been caught, and instead of just incarcerating the burglar, they've been made to sit and confront the person that they've burgled, and that person who's been the victim, the harmed has been able to express to the harmer why that was so traumatic and what damage they've done. And getting to the feelings is how we encourage harmers to change their behaviours. It also enables those responsible for the harm to acknowledge this impact and then take steps to put it right. It has been proven to be very successful. The fundamental premise of restorative practice is that people are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes when those in positions of authority do things with them, not to them or for them. Work together with the children and adults, it works across the board. Work with them, not to them. What does restorative practice not do? It's not an answer for everything. It's fully recognised that this will work in a percentage of cases, but won't work for everything. It won't resolve all conflict, because we know that some conflict that tends to be within adults' behaviours rather than within children and within the school environment. It can't repair all harm. It is not a naive alternative to punitive sanctions, and it is not an idealistic response to offending. There is a whole, a group of people who would say that this is namby-pamby, like I said at the moment, this is wrapping them up in cotton wool. And for some children it will be. So for some children it won't work. But generally, this is a really, really good method of support for children. It's also not an easy option for the harmer. I can guarantee where we've had major conflict. So an example might be there's been a fight in the playground and someone will say, oh, child A hit child B. And so instantly we would go into child A, you've hit them, you need to be disciplined, you're in detention, etc. And we focus on child A because that's what's been seen. But often we don't stop and think, what made child A do that? And when you sit down and have that conversation, I'll show you the conversations in a bit. When you sit down and you actually have those conversations and you listen to the children, actually you often find, I've often found that child A, who's being the one disciplined and labelled as the problem, is actually the harmed, and that the harmer needs to recognise what they're doing. And when you have these conversations, there are often tears. When you've got a major incident, I'm not talking about homework, I'm talking about a fight, or I'm talking about bullying. When we dig down and drill down and they hear what's been going on, the harmer is often very upset by that and doesn't reoffend. There is a restorative continuum, and it works from informal to formal. So the whole point of having a restorative school is it's not just for when you have a big incident. It is about classroom behaviour. It's about the way that you talk to children. It's the whole ethos of the school. So restorative approaches take many forms, from informal to formal. And the more serious the behaviour, the more formal the approach. Okay, so if it was one child forgetting their homework, you would be looking at a small impromptu conference. If it was a group of 5 children bullying and picking on another group of 5 children and you need to involve parents, you're looking at a formal conference at the formal end. But it all starts with good conversation and good effective statements within regular practice. So what are affirmative statements and questions? So it's all about, the whole restorative thing is about attacking the problem, not the pupil. So instead of saying, oh my goodness, you're such a pain, oh my goodness, you're causing me so much hard work, you change it around. What you did was a pain. So you're not a pain, but what you did was a pain. And you probably wouldn't even use that language, that's a bit harsh, but as an example, I wanted to be quite clear. So instead of attacking the person, you're attacking the behaviour. So you're separating at all times This is a good child that made a mistake. You need to focus on the positive. Instead of waiting and go, oh my God, you haven't finished your work yet. We've got 10 minutes left in lesson. You need to go in and say, do you know what? You've made a start. That's really good. I'd like you to complete it by the end of the lesson. The whole tone of that conversation then is really, really different, and it's working with them. And if the child then says, I'm not going to finish by the end of the lesson, what can we do to help you? Why don't you think you'll finish? Okay, what I'd like you to do is, instead of doing items 1 to 5, if you can finish for me, you've finished 1. If you can finish number 2 for me, actually we've still got success. You're keeping them on track, and you're keeping them learning, and you're retaining your relationship. And that's the whole purpose of the restorative format, right back at initial classroom level. We like to use neutral language. So instead of saying, you just won't stop shouting out, get out of my lesson, which is a really negative, it's you, it's etc. It's all very, very negative. You could say, I've noticed that you're choosing, this is very quiet, away from the rest of the group, so it's not exposing them, it's not harmful, it's not degrading. I've noticed that you're not following the rule of shouting out. Do you remember that there will be consequences if you continue? Instead of shouting out, can you write down your thoughts instead, and we'll go through them at the end? Now, the instant reaction that I've had from previous people is, do you know what, that takes so much time. But if you do it calmly, and you do it slowly, and you do it restoratively, a couple of times, you won't need to do it again. This child will continue to shout out if they don't understand what's going on. So instead of dealing with this issue every 10 minutes in every lesson for the whole term, you are working 1 or 2 in-depth conversations will eradicate this a lot quicker, and is teaching them emotional intelligence, and is teaching them social skill, and is teaching them that they can still talk to you without damaging that relationship. So yes, it takes a bit more time, but actually in the longevity of a school year, this actually reduces a lot of the behaviour triggers in the classroom. Okay. Always affirm the positive of behaviour. I think my practice has always been to accentuate, you know, when you go into a classroom and everybody's talking and you stand at the front and you don't want to shout out, everybody be quiet. I've got a bit of a hoarse throat today, so I don't want to shout. I'm just standing there and I'm waiting for them to come to attention. The most effective way to get a class to be quiet is to accentuate the positive of someone that's sitting quietly. So, Susie, you're paying attention to me. I really like the way you're waiting for me. Thank you very, very much. And then Catherine will start to listen, and then Ishrat will say, well, oh, I want some of that. Oh, well done, Catherine, you're now paying attention to me. Well done. And, oh, Ishrat, you're doing great. Well, the whole class will settle down, and that is much more restorative than everyone be quiet. So well done, Louise, you look ready to work. Put the pencil down and we can focus. Instead of, I've told you before to stop tapping your pencil. It's just a change in language, and it's just a change in attitude. Open communication is key to this. You can't do a restorative conversation if you're trying to mark some books or you're trying to get a group of kids out to class. You have to manage your environment so that you can have active listening on all parties. If the child is waiting for the bus, so I've been in this situation where a child has been really naughty, and I've said, you know, we're going to have a quick conversation at the end and see how we can make sure that doesn't happen again. And they've just been hopping from one foot to the other, and I can tell they're not listening. So I can discipline him and shout at him and make him stay behind for another 10 minutes. Or I can say, you're hopping, you're anxious. Why are you hopping and anxious? Oh, miss, because my mum's on a double yellow outside and I'm going to get shouted at if I go home. So then I'm going to have a bad day at school and a bad day at home. So I will say, right, I'm going to let you go now, and we're going to pick this up again in the morning. That's perfectly acceptable to do. Make sure that everybody is listening. The power of language is vital, that negative versus positive, your tone of voice. If you start to raise your voice, everybody else's voices will start to raise, and then we'll end up with everybody shouting. But if you bring it right down, people will listen to you a lot more if you're quiet and calm and not raising your voice and using negative tones. Awareness of communication styles. If you haven't done any training on that, you really, really should buy into something, because it's awesome. And that whole transactional analysis, it makes you think very, very deeply about how you communicate with people, building rapport with your kids, your body language. So this at the end of the lesson is never going to send them off home nicely, but you know, unfolding your arms, opening your language and using your body. Respect the children. Often people, I'm not respecting them because they don't give me any respect. Well, I know from experience that the more respect you give people, the more respect you get back. So if you start shouting at a child, you've lost the respect. So if you keep calm and you have that tone of voice and that language and you're commanding respect, you will get it. And they will respect you a lot more for not shouting at them. And open questions. Never assume, the whole restorative practice is never assume that you know what's gone on, because 9 times out of 10, you probably don't know what's gone on. You don't know why they've not done their homework. You don't know why they've just smacked Johnny. You don't know why they're feeling sad. And the open question, why? Tell me. Those are my 2 favorite questions. Tell me why, but just tell me what went on, because you will get far more information back from the children. The restorative conversations that take place in the restorative practice are those one-to-one conversations. That's the first level of informal conversation. Tell me why you haven't handed in your homework. Tell me why you've just smacked Johnny. One-to-one, separate, calm, without everybody else watching, not in front of everybody else, keeping that confidentiality and ensuring that that child is not harmed and is respected. When you've got 2 kids, so say someone threw a rubber at someone and someone threw a rubber back, and you've got that kind of small underlying behaviours going on in the classroom, we call that a small impromptu conference. It might happen immediately at the end of the lesson, the 2 people involved and then a neutral facilitator. And it is always in restorative practice, the facilitator takes no side. So you have to see both sides of the challenge, the conversation, the behaviour, what's going on, so that the person who threw the rubber knows that you're not going to instantly get angry at them, and then they're going to... I've seen this before where you've been directing your discipline at one child and the other child is behind you sniggering. Who's seen that with another teacher? We've all seen those kids go, ha, you're getting into trouble, la, 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 la. It was me, but you got into trouble. And then when they leave the classroom, it's like, oh, you did that and I got into trouble. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it, and we've probably all behaved in that way as leaders and facilitators. Really, really important that we remain neutral and we hear both children. When we do a conference, there is, if you're restorative practice trained, there is a series of questions you ask, and they are the same questions you ask the harmed and the harmer over time. So if this is something you're really interested in, going for the correct training to enable you to put on these conferences is very valuable and something I'd recommend. So with a small conference, it's used when problems have arisen between 2 people. That can be child-child, child-adult, adult-adult. I've had to do this with some of my LSAs where the child has felt harmed and they feel that they've been harmed by a harmer by the way the LSA has spoken to them, the support assistant has spoken to them. So I have taken the adult to one side and said, this is what we're going to do with this process. Taking the child, this is the conversation. I want you both to have respect. I want to hear both of you, and both adult and child need to know you're not going to take a side, because then you're retaining your own relationships. It uses a fixed set of questions. It allows both the harmed and the harmer to express their views in a controlled way. And it starts the process of rebuilding. The whole purpose of all of this is to rebuild the relationship, to create a safe environment. It's really important that you prepare. Don't rush into a restorative conversation without preparing all the parties and making sure that everyone understands what we are going to do in this process. At the end of the process, there is a clear closing statement where you review the progress, you compliment everybody on, wow, you know what, you really articulated well what the problem was, and you really articulated well why you behaved in that way. And together we've worked through the situation. And what we're going to do is we'll come back in a week and just make sure that this is resolved. And if it's not resolved, we'll have another conversation. And that takes out all of the sting. all the way along with these conferences, participation is voluntary. If one person doesn't agree, then it can't go ahead, because that can cause more harm if somebody is reluctant to engage in the process. If you've got someone really, really angry, you stop the process, you take that person to one side, you tell me why you're hurt, tell me what the problem is, you need to take part in this, or you don't need to take. Sometimes it's not worth it. So each situation needs to be looked at appropriately. A circle conference is usually when it's the whole class, when the whole class feels aggrieved at something, where there's a large group issue. This might be, 15, 20 children. It gives time for everybody. I've seen this done with the talking stick or the talking bottle or the talking chalk, allowing everybody to have a voice about what's going on. So this is where there's a really big group of people, and you can't do one-to-ones with everyone because there's too many issues. It can be used if there's a specific issue in a lesson to establish what's causing the difficulty. Ideal for situations where the whole group agreement is needed, and it is not to be used to gang up on individuals. So if you've got a whole class situation where 2 or 3 children are not joining in with a project, or not joining in with the practical work, or ruining the practical work for the rest of the class, it can't be used to say, right, we're all going to gang up on you 3 and make you 3 feel uncomfortable, because that's not restorative. Restorative is everybody leaves feeling well and good. Again, the facilitator remains neutral. The full conference is where you have maybe 2 groups of children who have been harmed, and you've got your harmed, and you've got your harmer, and possibly their supporters. So this might be a big bullying incident where you've got 2, I don't want to say gangs, we don't tend to have gangs, but if you've got 2 gangs, 2 opposing groups of children or even adults. I think if you were in the police force and if you were in the prison service, you might do it with adults, but we're focusing on young people here. So within the full conference, it's used for serious incidents. So these are your fights and your bullying, and it involves 2 or more children. It has to be really prepared well and highly scripted in order to ensure success. To do this process does need training, and I did 5 days of training on this, so I'm not going to be able to cover it all in 40 minutes. But it does involve all parties that have been harmed, including parents if needed. You do need the additional training. It needs to take place in a safe environment where no one feels at a disadvantage, and everybody needs to have that clear explanation of process. And then you've got your closing statements again. The process is the same, it's just different levels. Okay. So what are the benefits of restorative? It builds further on the culture of respect and discipline and cohesion within the small community. It increases staff confidence to deal with a wide variety of discipline issues. Often our team members don't always feel equipped to deal with bullying conversations, or online sexting conversations, or online bullying. Often our staff are not experienced enough to deal with, to support these issues. Low level disruption, classroom management. It empowers students to then take ownership of their behaviour and encourages self-discipline and responsibility for other learners and staff within the school community. For pupils, the restorative approach encourages students' responsibility and behaviour and relationships. It teaches students how to manage conflict, and that will take them into their adult life. These are life skills, being able to dissolve conflict. Conflict happens wherever we are, whether we're in an office, whether we're in a school, whether we're in a bank, whether we're in a police station, wherever we come in life, whatever you're going to do in life, you will come across conflict. It's inevitable. So giving the children the tools to deal with this will make them better parents as well, in my case. For teachers, although it's time heavy at the beginning of the process, it does actually end up giving you more time and energy to devote to teaching and learning, and less energy is spent on behaviour. Conflict resolution modules and training, they can be used as part of the curriculum. So if you have a thread of behaviour challenges going through the school and you're all communicating because this is your ethos, you can then weave modules into your moral ed, in PSHE if you're doing it, citizenship, whichever lessons you've got put aside, whether that's tutor time. There are millions of models out there on conflict lessons, activities, tasks you can do. Weave it into the curriculum. And as a result, what you find is classroom management is made easier because children gain improved listening skills. Does it work? So these numbers are quoted. I don't know if you can see that behind my behind the banner here, but in 2011 was the last briefing that I could find from the Restorative Justice Council. But when they looked at the restorative justice approach schools, exclusions were reduced by 51% compared to an increase of 65% where restorative justice was not practiced. Now, these numbers are UK state schools, so a little bit of a different environment to where we are now. But I think you can see that the restorative approach has supported schools where they've taken it on board. Research concluded that in 14 schools, 73% had fewer classroom exclusions. So that's your get out now, go and see the head teacher or go and see your line manager. 81% experienced fewer fixed term exclusions, and 70% achieved fewer verbal abuse towards staff and pupils. So again, UK stats, UK numbers, not international environments, but still quite powerful and meaningful data. The other thing I hear quite often is, well, a detention never did me any harm, or, well, my parents used to smack me and it never hurt me. And this tweet went out again a few weeks ago, and I kind of feel it. If you suffered in life and you want other people to suffer because you did, and you think you turned out fine, in actual fact, you didn't turn out fine. Okay, and I think that's really worth remembering. So detentions never did me any harm. They might not have done, but it doesn't mean they won't do other people harm. And actually, what's that teaching our children? I don't think detentions necessarily, unless you're doing full-on restorative conversation within those detentions, what are they achieving? So the slides will go, Catherine and myself and Susie, we have a Dropbox where the slides all get put, and so you can have a look at the slides. These are some of the references that I've alluded to in the conversation today. Restorative Justice Briefing is there. The book I mentioned about behaviour management in the classroom, A Transactional Analysis, this is by Newell and Jeffrey, and the link is there for that. And there is also Restorative Practices Handbook. I think you've got my book, Susie, because I was looking for that. I don't know if you've still got it. Like the Burgundy book. I was looking for it, but I thought, oh, maybe Susie's got it. There is a book that's recently come out by Mark Burnett and Marge Thornspan. This is the link for Amazon. It's 152 dirhams. I looked at it today. Restorative Practice and Special Needs. So another interesting read there. And I'm also very aware of the work that Paul Dix has done. One of his books was called When Adults Change, Everything Changes. So that's also a very worthwhile read. His whole, he's done quite a lot of publications, but his whole ethos matches very closely in with the restorative practice. On this link, the Restorative Justice organisation is in the UK. The CEO of Restorative Practice has actually gone on to become a really good friend of mine. So if you want training, if you want to become a member, if you want anything, do let me know. If you just want to watch some more videos and you want to hear a different voice to mine, there are some YouTube links here and a Vimeo link here. Restorative Justice in Schools, that should actually say Restorative Justice in Action 2. So you've got section 1 and section 2 and a Vimeo. But if you Google restorative justice, so much information comes up. You don't have to rely on just my word. Is it okay if I give a plug, Catherine, to the, thank you. So as we said at the beginning, I am the BSME network lead for special needs. Our next BSME, this is only for BSME members. So if you're a BSME member, just write down the 21st of January and get in touch about joining us for that. The second thing we've got going on through BSME, and this is open to everyone internationally. It is relevant across all curriculums. It's relevant to the universe. So do feel free to join us. I've just realised, Catherine, you've stepped in as a speaker for this, and I haven't added your name in. So Catherine is also speaking, but Gronya Boyle is coming to speak to us from an educational psychologist point of view, relevant across all curriculums. Bronwyn is a dyslexia specialist, and she's coming to talk to us about using images to support children with dyslexia. Joe Page is the one that's no longer speaking because Catherine is there. Mariette Carstens is coming on to talk about parents. Rachel's, I can't actually remember what Rachel's going to talk about. So we've got Rachel, we've got occupational therapy, we've got Jazz's speech and language. Catherine Booth is coming on from Pearson's, and she is talking about pathways that are alternative to your GCSEs. So she's talking about entry levels, functional skills, etc. So that will be a very, very interesting talk. Siobhan Brady is going to be talking about the Sendia Award. Got Tamsin coming, Haneen coming, and obviously I'm going to be there. And our guest speaker coming out of the UK is Daniel Sabel, who manages Inclusion Experts and has so much knowledge, and I just love hearing him to talk. So the Inclusion Conference is on the whole weekend, 29th and 30th. This is a fantastic deal. For 850 dirhams, if your school signs up, you can have unlimited staff. So we've got talks and webinars and training modules all the way through the 2 days. It's a very, very full, if you want the full itinerary, let me know. But for 850 dirhams, you sign up as a school. Every single member of staff can come online and watch what they want live or recorded at the time. So unlimited staff and also unlimited access to those videos. So everything's going to be recorded. Everything is then going to be available for your schools to use. So if your teachers can't access it, but you want, so say Adam, the occupational therapist, does a talk and you want to share that with all your primary staff, you can then take that video and use it as training material in your school. So the registration there is at the bottom. This is international, this is across curriculum, across language. It's not specific to the British curriculum or anything, and it is open to, I think the BSME members get it for 850, non-members are about 900 dirhams. It's very, very little difference in total. So everybody can join this. This is not just BSME, and that is a conference that I've put together with BSME for the whole 2 days over 20. I'm very, very excited about that. I need to do some work on preparing some presentations. If you want to get hold of me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way. Catherine, Susie, and myself are all on LinkedIn, and that is our main method of communication. Any videos that I've made, especially if you're a head of inclusion and you're struggling with the individual service agreement in Dubai, link in to my YouTube, and those are my 2 email addresses if you need them. They'll all be in the Dropbox as well. Okay. So don't give up on this year. We're only a week or 2 into 2021, but I think a lot of us are feeling already, I just can't get through this year. Absolutely, yes, you can get through this year. Fight for the good, accentuate the positive, ignore the negative. If you're surrounded by negative people, you might need to just move yourself away, okay? And find positive people around. There are plenty of us out there. Keep showing up, keep loving, keep giving back. Keep being kind, keep being brave, keep caring, keep trying new things, keep showing grace, keep on. The world needs you to believe in the good. We can do this, guys. We are a very close-knit community. That's it, Catherine. I'm going to go now.
Well, thank you very much, Louise. As always, a very informative session. We're having some really lovely comments in the comment box. And for once, we have no questions. So it was obviously very concise, clear and well delivered, because nobody's asking. So that's wonderful. I was just
adding, Catherine, that in the chat, that it is a very, very good way to create your own IBP, individual behavior plan.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's shifting that focus from the negative to the positive all the time and opening dialogue. Because especially at home, when kids have very often very few options for people to speak to, nobody's really asking them, well, why or what's happening. So it's important that we can be the ones to do that and support them in that way. If anybody has any really good ideas or expertise about our graduating students, seniors, high school students and senior graduates approaching the end of their school career, those who are struggling, if anyone has any ideas of what's working well, what are they doing to support IGCSEs, board exams, MSATs, any of the examination boards, please do let me know, because we're going to create a session around best practice for our graduates, especially those who have moderate to severe needs, who may have very limited options. So if you know of somebody who's doing something really good, let me know. Nominate someone, I'll reach out, or come yourself and present with us. We would love to have people. Thank you so much, Louise. Thanks, Susie, as always. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We had more than 90 people today, so that's a really good sign.
Really
please do engage, ask us questions, make comments, because I know loads of you are probably experiencing amazing things that you're doing in your school or in schools around you or in centres or wherever you're practicing. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session, which will be under the Wellbeing umbrella with Susie. And I'll be in touch over email with any updates in the coming days.